Wanna play?
Here's Johnny!
I need a bigger boat.
What's your favorite scary movie?
We have such sights to show you.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wanna Play. My name is James Kenna, and today we're going to be doing another top 10 list. And today's top 10 list is going to be the 10 greatest opening scenes in all of horror. There are a lot of very classic opening scenes in horror movies, and it was difficult. It was difficult to narrow it down to only 10. There are a lot of good scenes, and I think you're going to agree with me for the most part on this list. This list isn't going to be too controversial, but if I do leave any out, let me know what your top 10 are in the comments below. Before we get right into this, though, I do want to give one honorable mention, and that's going to be to Crow's Nest 2. He's coming back around.
I know this is a job for Wilbur! Number 7! Let's go!
No, there's a killer, I swear! See what I mean? So let's get straight into it. So coming in at number 10 is going to be the opening scene from Final Destination 2. Final Destination 2 is my favorite of the Final Destination franchise because I think that it probably has the best kills in the series, and I think it has the best premonition. And the premonition is what the opening scene is. It's the car crash scene, the iconic car crash scene. You know the one where there's the big log truck and it kind of, something goes wrong and one of the logs falls off the truck, bounces off the road and just smashes completely through a guy's car, through his face and everything. There was a lot of Final Destination opening scenes that I could have chose from. There was obviously Final Destination 3's roller coaster scene, but I think there was a little bit too much CGI in that. There was obviously the opening to the original, the plane crash, but I just think that this car crash is the best one out of all of them, which is why it earns its place at number 10 on my list. Coming in at number 9 is going to be The Strangers. The Strangers is such a great film, but I think that the opening scene, or honestly more like the first act of the film, is one of the most tension-filled and suspenseful scenes ever. It's so freaking good. It starts off with a guy proposing and getting denied, so these two, boyfriend and girlfriend, are at each other's, not at each other's throats, but it's a little bit awkward, you know? And then basically they get a knock on the door, they answer it and somebody's like, oh man, wrong house, and they walk away, but then it happens a few more times a couple minutes later, and then it all comes ahead. Like, I'm talking not the openings, I'm talking like the whole first act, because the whole first act of this film is so freaking good. And the only reason why it's down here at number 9 is because I'm including so much of the movie's runtime. And if it was more fair and it was only like a couple minutes, it would probably be way higher, but dude, it's so good. One of the legitimate scariest moments in horror ever is that first time when the girlfriend, she's in the kitchen, she's like doing dishes or something, and then in the very different background, like you barely see it, like it's there, it's not blurred to the point of like it's just like a shadow, and they don't make a big deal about it either. The guy steps out of the hallway in the mask, and oh my god, like it's so terrifying. It's such like it gives you chills when you watch it. It's such a good opening scene. Any opening scene that gives you chills, or any scene in horror really that gives you chills after you've seen as many as I have, is basically just a classic scene, and it obviously earns its spot at number 9 just because of that. And at number 8 is one that you've probably heard me talk about before if you've seen a lot of my videos, but number 8 is going to be Ghost Ship. Ghost Ship has one of the best opening scenes in all of horror, which is why it's on this list. It is absolutely insane. I didn't expect much going into Ghost Ship. I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. But the opening scene is so good. It's easily the most memorable scene in the movie and probably the best. And there are some very good scenes in this film, but the opening scene is just absolutely off the walls. It's crazy. There's this classic old party. The reason why this ship is a ghost ship in the first place, they're having this little classic party. It looks like it's the early 1900s. There's a singer up there, and there's just all these rich folk, basically. And then something goes wrong, and a string comes down and just completely eviscerates all of them. Like, literally, like, everybody's split in half. There are people getting decapitated, their arms and legs ripped off, and it's all capped off in this one wide shot that's impossible. Like, you can't count the body count in this film. It's impossible because of this wide shot. It's just this one big wide shot, and there's just limbs and blood everywhere. It's such a crazy scene, and I think that Ghost Ship is worth the watch just because of the opening scene alone. Coming in at number 7 is one from one of my all-time favorite movies, that is Dracula. This is a pretty underrated opening scene in my opinion, but it is perfect. It's one of the best scenes in the film, and that's really saying something because there are a lot of phenomenal scenes in the original Dracula. That's why it's such a classic. But the opening scene is so good. It's when Rainfield arrives at the town, and he just thinks that Dracula is this normal guy. He's Count Dracula, and he's telling all the townsfolk. He's just kind of going there to eat, and the townsfolk are just like, hey, you're new here. What are you doing here? He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to visit Count Dracula up at Borgo Pass tonight, and I need a ride. And they're like, wait a second, and they're all trying to convince him not to, and it's such an atmospheric, classic scene. Like, it's so good. And then, of course, the lady gives him the cross. That's a great moment, and one of my favorite, and I think the scariest scene in the entire movie, and maybe in the entire Universal Classic Monsters series as a whole, is the scene where he's riding up to Dracula's castle. There's no music. It's all just pretty much grain in the background, and it's so creepy. He's riding up, and he looks in the front, and it's a bat. And then he looks back again, and it's this guy, but he's not normal. He's got like crazy eyes, and he looks so creepy. It's one of the creepiest scenes in all of horror, in my opinion, and it deserves a place on this list. Coming in at number 6 is from Night of the Living Dead. That's right, they're coming to get you, Barbara. That whole scene up until she's basically in the house. Like, what I think of the opening scene basically in Night of the Living Dead is from the very beginning, that one wide shot, that super long shot, it lasts like forever, of the car just driving up the mountain and up the hill, just to show how unbelievably isolated this area is. It's crazy. It's so creepy. And then they get out, and of course you get They're Coming to Get You, Barbara, and the storm starts brewing, and there's the first ever zombie and Johnny's death, and then she runs back, she runs into the house, you get that crazy push-in on that dead, rotting skeleton corpse on the upstairs floor. It's amazing. It's such a good opening scene to an absolute classic movie. One of the best opening scenes in horror, and it makes it on my list at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is obviously the opening scene from Jaws. You have to have the opening scene from Jaws on your top 10 list of best opening scenes in all of horror. It's such a good classic opening scene. It's on every single poster of Jaws. You know a poster. This one right here. That poster. That's the opening scene of Jaws, and it's one of the most recognizable, if not the most recognizable opening scenes in horror, maybe even ever. It's such a great opening scene. It's this girl, she's basically stripping down, she's going skinny dipping, which I think probably inspired all the Friday the 13th moments where they do that, and all those slashers. I think this was really the first one to do that, and she's skinny dipping and nothing's really happening. She's just having a good time for a couple minutes, and then she bobs underwater. She comes up, she bobs underwater again, and the music is getting louder and louder and louder, and then eventually she gets pulled under. You don't see anything. You don't see the shark at all. she just gets pulled underwater, and that's it. That's the opening scene. It's such a good opening scene, and it definitely deserves a spot on this list. I don't think any of you can argue. Coming in at number 4 is the opening scene from The Omen. Obviously, I think that the opening scene from The Omen has to be on this list. It's Look at Me, Damien. It's easily the most recognizable moment from the entire film. It starts off basically at Damien's birthday party. I'm not sure how old he's turning. He's turning like 2 or 3 or something. And the nanny's just kind of hanging around. You get Gregory Peck, he's just kind of hanging around. Everybody's just kind of hanging around. Nothing's really happening. They're just having this nice old party in this giant house. It just looks like a good time. And then you hear, you don't see her first, you hear, "Look at me, Damien, look at me." And then it cuts to this giant shot of their huge mansion, and the nurse, or the nanny, is up there on the top with a noose around her neck, and it pushes in. She's like, "Look at me, Damien, it's all for you." And she jumps off and just hangs herself in front of all these kids, and it just smashes through the window. It's such a crazy scene. Another one that this reminds me of that I'm actually kind of surprised didn't make this list, and is definitely an honorable mention, is The Rage Carrie 2. It's another suicide by falling scene. I think The Rage Carrie 2 is an easy pick for number 11 on this list, but in this entry we're talking about The Omen, and it always messes me up for whatever reason. It's always super standout of a moment if somebody kills themselves in the opening scene in like some sort of crazy, unexpected way. It always grabs my attention so much more than the movie otherwise would if that scene wasn't in it, and The Omen is no exception. It's crazy. It's a crazy opening scene, and once again, I think the opening scene is worth the watch alone. Coming in at number 3, and these next 3 are like basically just the pinnacle. These are just like the pinnacle of horror openings. Number 3 is gonna be Halloween. Obviously, it's Halloween. It might be the most famous opening scene, this and Jaws, in horror, because everybody knows this. It's such a well-made opening scene. It's entirely done through point of view. You don't know whose point of view it is. It's just this person walking up to this house. It's pretty much just one shot the entire time. And he walks into the house, he puts on a mask, he grabs a knife, he walks upstairs and kills a girl, basically just doing her hair, just kills her. And you get like those crazy shots of him like looking at the knife as he stabs her, and just it's brutal. You don't really see that much. It's almost like in Psycho, the shower scene. You don't really see that much, but then you go outside, he walks down the stairs, and the adults show up and they take off his mask, and this is the first time that the camera cuts. It's all a massive one take. The camera cuts to a wide shot, and they take off the mask, and it's a little kid, and it's Michael Myers, and it's such a good way to open the Halloween franchise. Just thinking about it right now, it's such an awesome opening scene, and this is really the scene that got me hooked on horror, because Halloween, as some of you may know, is the first movie that really got me into horror, and this was honestly the scene that did it. It's the opening scene, and it's one of the best opening scenes in horror history. It's classic, and it comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, you want to talk about atmospheric. Number 2 is 28 Days Later. This is by far the best scene in the film, and that's not dissing on the rest of the film, because the rest of the film is great. It's a great film, but the opening scene is by far the best scene in the film. It's the most recognizable, and it's the most well-known, and it is the best scene. It's technically not the opening scene of the film, because the opening is really the monkeys getting out and like kind of spreading this virus to everybody. But the opening scene, the scene that people, I guess, consider to be the opening scene is, of course, the introduction of Jim. He's in the hospital, and he's in a coma, and it cuts, it says 28 days later. That's basically the title card of the film. And then he wakes up, and it's completely abandoned. It's literally just him. He wakes up out of the coma, and he's walking around London, and the cinematography is great, and the score is great, and the camera work is just so awesome. Obviously the most classic shot in the film, and one of the most classic shots in horror, is when he turns around and basically the camera swings with him, and it's just like him in front of Big Ben, in front of London. There's like trash everywhere, and it's nobody but him. It's such a great and atmospheric scene, and it is such a good way to open a film. And it's one of the best scenes in all of horror, not just openings, and it comes in at number 2. But coming in at number 1, sorry, there's gonna be no upset, there's gonna be no shocking, whoa, that's the best scene. No, it's the opening scene in Scream. It has to be. The opening scene of Scream is top 10 best scenes in all of horror ever, and I don't think many people would disagree with that. I think it's easily the best scene in the entire Scream franchise, and that's really saying something, because the Scream franchise is just one of the best and most consistent horror franchises out there. I wanted to put Scream 2 on this list as well, because that is also an amazing opening. It's nowhere near the original Scream, but it is still a great opening, but I decided to leave it off to make room for some other ones. But the opening scene in Scream is such a classic scene. It's one of the best opening scenes ever, like straight up of all time. This scene, pretty much this scene alone, completely changed the horror landscape for the next couple years. Obviously you have Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore, who was a huge star at the time, and she was on all the posters, she was on all the materials. It opens up, she's talking to the stranger on the phone, and he's asking, of course, what's your favorite scary movie? And she responds, Halloween, and it just begins this crazy torture scene, which all leads up to, of course, the end, where she gets gutted by this guy and strung up on a tree, and her parents see her and get that quick push in on her, and boom, fade to like white title card. Like it's such a great scene. Honestly, alone, this could make for one of the best short films literally ever made, because it's such a good scene, and I don't think that there's going to be too much arguing. Like, this is the best opening scene in horror, and most people, if you ask them, they'll agree. This is a classic opening scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of horror. It's top 10 best scenes in all of horror, and it earns its spot at number 1. Thanks for watching my ranking on the top 10 best horror opening scenes. Let me know what your top 10 favorite horror opening scenes are in the comments down below, and let me know which ones that I missed out. Obviously, there are a ton of opening scenes that I missed out. There are a ton of amazing opening scenes in horror. One of them that I'm actually surprised didn't make this list and came so close that I didn't already mention in the video is The Invisible Man. I love that opening scene, so like, that's definitely an honorable mention. So yeah, let me know, as I said, what your honorable mentions and I guess top 10 opening scenes in all of horror are down below in the comments. You can follow me on Instagram and message me if you want at James from WannaPlay. Subscribe if you want to, like if you must, but always, I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, no, you can subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. But thank you for watching. Goodbye and good night. Bang.